Next up, the proposed avigation, I believe that's how you pronounce it, avigation easement over tax map 49, parcel 204, 5592 Airport Road, Salisbury, Maryland. Mr. Tony Rudy, again, welcome back. Please explain that term.
Certainly. So I'll try to be brief, but I want to give you a little background on this. So we actually have 5 avigation easement offers out there right now, and 2 of the offers contain a real property that we have to acquire. The reason for this, it's associated with the runway extension, but it's not. It has to, anytime you work on a piece of pavement such as the runway, before you can improve it, the FAA wants everything to be up to the current FAA standards. So that's why we're going after these easements and the property, acquiring the properties. Basically, they're to protect the airspace. So if there's trees that grow up in these areas, we'll have to cut the trees down. And also the runway protection zone, which is off of the runway, we have to take interest in that property to make sure nothing is built in that area to protect that as well. So that's kind of a brief a background. As we were working on this whole runway project funding matrix, probably over the last several months, due to the decreased funds we'll be getting from the FAA, we had to figure out how local funding and federal funding fits in, over the course of this whole project. So we felt it best to take care of this property acquisition up front, and we have extra revenues from the CARES funding that came in last fiscal year. So I had our airport accountant look at, pull the munis files, look at what our actual expenses were from fiscal year 21 to our actual revenues. And because of the extra CARES funding that came in, we do have plenty to cover actually all 5 of these. Tonight we're just talking about the one which is $14,400, which the offer was out there and the property owner agreed to that avigation easement. So there will be 4 others, and in total we're talking, hard to say right now, but obviously with negotiations with landowners, but I wouldn't expect the other 4 to be over $300,000, or I should say all 5 of them to be over $300,000 total. And we do have, right now, we do have enough in our fund balance to cover that.
All right. Any more questions? All right. If the council agrees, you can come back to the next meeting. Is everybody on board with this?
We have to do it.
All right.
No choice.
October 19th then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
Next, discussion on capital project Harmon Field. Mr. Steve Miller, Director of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism.
Good evening. Do you mind if I stand here?
You're fine.
Very good. Thank you. Well, good evening. I want to thank members of the council for having me here tonight to talk about a proposed project for Harmon Field. My apologies to Mr. Holloway, Mr. McKinney, and Mr. Hastings, who heard a similar presentation last night, and the folks that are here. I thought this is past my bedtime, but I'm impressed that you all are here. But for the benefit of the public that's viewing, and also for the other council members who weren't able to attend, I'd like to make just a short presentation on what's being proposed for Harmon Field. I'm going to break the presentation into 4 real simple parts. The first, I just want to give a brief background on the history of Harmon Field. Secondly, I'll provide a general overview of what we're proposing to do at the park. Third, outline benefits, or why we think this project would be beneficial to the county. And lastly, touch on funding sources which we've identified, which we believe could accomplish the project and do so in a very short period of time. Once that is done, I'd be certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have. In terms of the history of Harmon Field actually goes back to 1928, when funds were given to the city of Salisbury by the Harmon Foundation, which is named after a real estate developer and philanthropist, a gentleman named William E. Harmon from New York City. The funds were used to build a playground and ball field over on Carroll Street, over by the hospital, and that became one of the first public recreation sites in Wicomico County. In 1969, the location of Harmon Field switched from that original location on Carroll Street to the current location on Churchill Ave next to the YMCA, in a land swap between the county and the city. At the time, the county needed a piece of property for a health department building, and so they swapped with the city, and the city built on this site what they called at the time the new Harmon Field. Later in the 1990s, the city conveyed that back to the county, and so that's where things stand today. It's a county-owned park as part of our park system. Anyway, since Harmon was at one time one of the only lighted fields around for many years, Harmon served as the hub site for recreation activity in Wicomico County, for things like men's, women's, and co-ed softball, for special events like the King in His Court events. I've heard many, many stories from many people about people lining the field and some of the great nights and events that would happen there, and youth programs like softball, baseball, soccer, and events under the lights. And so, without a doubt, the more stories through the 75-year anniversary, we've done a lot of research on this park and many others, and no doubt, at Harmon there was a glorious heyday. And there were a lot of great moments there, and some of you may have witnessed, some of you may have participated in those great moments. But as you know, time marches on and things change, and that time has passed. Whereas at one time, Harmon was one of the only places you could play ball. Today, just in the county-owned park system, we have more than 40 ball diamonds in the county park system where baseball and softball is played. If you were to count municipal parks and Board of Education facilities and quasi-public facilities like Salvation Army and others, there's more than 90 baseball diamonds in the county. There's plenty of places to play ball, and that's a good thing. That's not a negative. That's a wonderful thing. We love baseball, we love softball, and there are a lot of places for residents to be able to play the sports. But you can see what's happened in terms of Harmon over the years. As more and more parks were built, and those parks were spread out throughout the county, and more ball fields were built, including 8 at our athletic complex. At the same time, while that growth is happening, Harmon Field is getting older and older. 2015, the light poles rotted, so those lights had to come down. And what we've ended up with is a single field site now with no lights, no permanent restroom, no operational concession stand, for which there is very little, minimal public demand or need. And that's not my opinion. Here are the numbers. Over the last 4 years, excluding, you can take the 2020 COVID numbers out of the equation, but over the last 4 years, the field has seen on average about 77 hours per year of organized play. And the bulk of that 77 roughly hours per year is our in-house county leagues that have practices. And that's essentially what it's been used for the majority of the time, is practices. Now, to put that in perspective, one ball field at the athletic complex would average about 1,100 hours per year of play. We would get 70 hours of play on one field out there in about 2 weeks. And keep in mind, that's one ball field. We have got 8 ball fields out at the athletic complex. So you can see what's happened over time. The hub has simply changed locations from places like Harmon to places like Parker to Del Mar to Fruitland Little League, East Wicomico, Willards, etc. There's many, many places to play, and that has spread. And in terms of Harmon, what we have now is what was once a hub facility, which is now a seldom used practice field. And that's just kind of the reality of where things are today. So what are we proposing to do? So what we're proposing is to do an approximately $1 million renovation to the site, which would include a brand new playground. It would replace that giraffe swing set that you saw from the 1970s. We would add a second basketball court to the site. I will say, though the softball field is often vacant, most times when I drive by Harmon, there are people on that basketball court. There are a lot of folks that use the court, and this proposal would add a second court and also light the courts, and we think that would be a tremendous boost to the community, and we think it would get a lot of use. And that's a big part of this that maybe hasn't been talked about as much, but that's a huge part of this, is the basketball piece. And lastly, we would convert the softball field, as you can see in the drawing, into a 12-court pickleball complex, among other park improvements. Now, I know you've heard a little bit about pickleball from the folks that have come here, But for the viewing public, in case they don't know, because there are some who don't know what the sport is, I've got a very short 1-minute video that I'll show you just to give you an introduction to the sport, and then I'll continue with the presentation.
Pickleball was created in 1965 in Bainbridge Island, Washington, and is now one of the fastest growing sports in America. Pickleball is very easy to learn and can be played by anyone. It's traditionally played in doubles or singles. So let's just get right into it. Let's start with the court. It's played on a badminton-sized court, and there's a non-volley zone called the kitchen. Each player has a paddle and uses it to hit the ball back and forth. Traditionally, games go to 11 or 15, 1 point at a time. So what are the rules? The serve must be underhand and cross-court. The returning team can hit it back once the ball bounces and the volley begins. The ball can only bounce once per side, so be quick and remember, stay out of the kitchen. Pickleball is governed by the USA Pickleball Association. That's us. Our goal is to promote the sport, maintain the rules, and hold sanctioned tournaments for our members to compete in across the entire country. Pickleball is fun, it's social, and it's great exercise. So are you ready to play? Become a USA Pickleball member today.
As pointed out in the video, pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in the United States today. There's over 4 million people that are playing the sport, and that continues to grow by the day. And one of the appeals of pickleball is not only is it a fast growing sport, but it's a very diverse sport. As you can see by the chart here, and as you've heard in the testimony of talking about youth and adults playing, pickleball is not a sport just for old folks, and it's not just a sport for kids, it's a sport for everybody. People of all ages, youth, adult, seniors can play pickleball, and it's a sport that can be adapted for folks even that have disabilities, that they could also play the sport. And so that's an appeal, certainly from where I sit as a Recreation and Parks Director. It's a sport that literally anybody can play. And so that's one of the great benefits about it. So why does this proposal make sense for the county? I'm going to give 2 primary reasons why we think this would benefit. Number one is it gives county residents a new recreation asset that would meet the public demand. I'll tell you, we get calls every single week in our department for people requesting pickleball courts. Where can we play? Where are your courts? We want to play pickleball. And we get those calls every single week. There's over 250 regular pickleball players. You've heard from some tonight through the Salisbury Pickleball Club and other associated groups, and over 1,000 regular players within an hour drive distance of Salisbury. Last night was, I think, a small demonstration of that. We had a public meeting at the Civic Center, and over 150 people showed up. It was an incredible turnout and a very positive group, a very enthusiastic group that came out last night, and I think that's just a small piece of the pickleball community that's out there. Now, at this point, to meet the demand, we've been trying, as we've been updating our tennis courts, we've been trying to install pickleball lines at various places in the county. But the problem is, in most of those cases, the majority of those are shared use courts. So in other words, it's tennis and pickleball, or basketball and pickleball. And sometimes that can lead to conflict. Councilman Davis was out at the Billie Jean Jackson this weekend doing the cleanup of the community, and that was tremendous. They had a great turnout. But one of the things that came up as we were there is a pickleball event was happening on the basketball court, and one of the concerns from somebody was, what happens if the basketball guys show up and they want to play pickup like they normally do, and you have a conflict, and that's one of the problems with having a shared use facility or shared use courts. So that's kind of the situation as it exists. It's a shared use situation. Another issue that we have is we've had two spots in the county, we have exclusive pickleball courts, but those facilities are not designed for high traffic or parking. An example I gave last night is Kilburn Park. That's a neighborhood park where it's designed for people to walk to it. You walk to the park, you enjoy the activity, you walk home. Well, there's 2 pickleball courts out there at Kilburn, which is wonderful. The residents there love it, but the problem is many other folks from all over the place are going to Kilburn and overrunning that park, and that's not how that park is designed to handle that kind of traffic or parking. And so having a dedicated pickleball-only complex would give members of this community a new asset and would open up opportunities from our youth all the way up to our seniors, of people who want to stay active and play a sport. And so that's one big reason, as a local benefit to our residents. The second big reason is that this would provide another tourism attraction for our county. I know council members, you know this, but for the public as well, we've had in Wicomico County a lot of success over the years running amateur sports tournaments, regional and national tournaments in sports like baseball and softball and wrestling and basketball, nationally recognized events that bring thousands of people every year into our community and millions of dollars into our community every single year. People that stay in our hotels, eat in our restaurants, shop in our stores, and it's a tremendous boost to our community. And having this complex in this location would give us that opportunity to host major tournament events and bring revenue into the county. An example from Auburn, Alabama, they recently built a 12-court, similar to what we're proposing here, 12-court pickleball complex. They're bringing in over $1 million of direct spending into their community and over 3,000 hotel room nights a year just for this pickleball facility. As a matter of fact, in this spot, it has gone so well that they're now constructing 12 more courts and changing it now from 12 to a 24-court complex because the demand has just exceeded what they have available. And just in Wicomico County, we've been talking about this for many months, but we decided to test this out. We want to see is the interest truly there. So we've hosted 2 tournaments over the last 7 months, and here are the results. The first event we did was back in March. We just kind of threw this one together in a few weeks, and we had 114 participants come out to Billie Jean Jackson from 5 different states, from Pennsylvania, Virginia, New Jersey, Delaware. And then this past weekend, we had another tournament out at Billie Jean Jackson. We had another 107 participants. That again came from all over the Mid-Atlantic, including 2 participants from Florida. So we've seen firsthand that the interest is there, both local and from people driving from a distance to be there. And one of the benefits of Harmon as a location is that Harmon would give you the opportunity to do even bigger events as this grew into the future. Not only would you have the 12 dedicated courts as a hub facility at Harmon, but within walking distance of Harmon, you have the Civic Center, you have the YMCA, you have the City Park tennis courts, which could be lined for an event. You have 3 local high schools with tennis courts. So within a 1-mile radius of Harmon Field, you could have as many as 75 pickleball courts, which puts you in the game for regional and national events. Courts that are in proximity of hotels and restaurants and a downtown area. And that's what tournament organizers want. They want to come to a place where all that is as close together as possible. And you have that opportunity with the location at Harmon, not just to do events on those 12 courts, but you could put yourself in the game to do regional and national type events. And the infrastructure is all there. The mayor of Salisbury came to our meeting last night and announced on the spot, he said the city will donate the cost to hook up to the sewer and water at Harmon. And so everything is there. It's a prime opportunity, and it gives us another tool not only for our local residents, but again, another tool in the toolbox to draw people to this county who may not otherwise come here, and it gives them a reason to come. The last part, and then I'll be happy to answer questions, is how do you pay for it? And to me, this is one of the more exciting parts of it. I mentioned earlier, we estimate this to be about $1 million project. And we've identified 2 funding sources, which in the end would not require us to ask the county for a single dollar from the county budget in order to make this happen. The first funding source is a $700,000 state grant through the local park and playground infrastructure bill that was passed by the Maryland General Assembly last year. That state grant requires $0 in local match. And it's pending right now at the state, and we expect that to be approved in the next month. All we would need is the endorsement from this council that we would accept the funds if it was approved. And if we get that, those funds would be approved, I believe, in the next month. And I do want to point out to the council and to the public that this grant is unique in that it's an FY22 grant only. This was a special grant that was passed in part because of COVID and people recognizing the importance of parks and how people are using parks. So they put in a special bill for park projects such as the one that we're talking about tonight. So in other words, if we kick the tires on this and say, hey, we don't want to do this, we'll do it next year, that $700,000 would not be there. So we would have to find a different funding source or ask the taxpayer to foot the bill. So that's one funding source that is right there for us to make this happen. The second funding source would come from a $300,000 contribution from the YMCA, which is adjacent to Harmon, as part of an agreement between the county and the Y. We have a draft MOU, which you have as part of your packet of materials, which would need council approval. But I would like to just take a moment and provide a few highlights of that agreement because there's been, I think, a lot of confusion maybe and people not understanding what's being proposed as far as the agreement goes. Here's some just basic highlights from what we've agreed to in principle. The YMCA has agreed to contribute $300,000 towards the construction of this project, which to me is unheard of, that a nonprofit would put that much skin in the game for a project like this that's not even on their property. To me, that is a tremendous commitment from the YMCA, but they've agreed to contribute $300,000 towards building it. Not only would they contribute the capital funds, but they would also provide access to the parking lot. Our parking lots are adjacent. We believe that with the increased use of the basketball, the playground, the pickleball, we're probably going to be about 15 parking spots short on busy nights, and that doesn't even count tournaments when you get a mess of people coming in. And the YMCA has agreed at no charge to connect their parking lot and allow our users to use both parking lots, and even to tie into their stormwater infrastructure as we develop the park, that they've given us that ability, if that can work out, that we could tie into their infrastructure. And lastly, we would work together, the county and the YMCA, we would work together to offer public programming at the site, which would include clinics and leagues, lessons, and tournaments. And I do want to make a special emphasis of this point, and it's spelled out in the agreement, but the county would maintain 100% control of the facility. And the county would maintain 100% control of the schedule for the facility. We're not donating anything to the YMCA. We're not building anything for the YMCA or for YMCA members. I think if anything, you could make the opposite case, that the Y is helping us build a facility, but either way, we're not donating anything. This would be a county facility, 100% under the control of the county. Any programs that the YMCA would conduct at the site would have to be approved by us. We would control that schedule, and the Y has agreed to make any of their programs available and open to the public. In other words, nothing would be exclusive to just YMCA members. If they run a youth program, anybody can sign up for it, whether you're a member of the Y or not. So everything would be open to the public. And I will tell you, just from a logistics standpoint, like many other organizations, we're having difficulty finding staff to run programs, to clean parks, to do the things that we do. So to have a partner agency that can help us execute and run programs for the public would be a tremendous boost to us for many reasons. And lastly, I'll point out that even when programs are taking place, whether it's us or the YMCA operating the program and running the program, we would always leave, we have 12 courts, we would always leave several courts open for open play, for drop-in folks to come in. Just like right now, if you go to a basketball court, you bring your ball, you can drop in, play, go home. That's how we would leave multiple courts open at all times for the public to come in just for drop-in play, just to play for fun, and then go home. The only exception to that might be a big tournament event. If we had a major event, you'd probably want to use every court that you have, but that would be the exception. But otherwise, we would leave courts open for the public to come. So essentially, that's what we're trying to do. And if I can summarize this for you in 30 seconds or less, to me, this is the opportunity that we have sitting here tonight. $1 million is sitting on the table for us to renovate a 50-year-old park, a park that certainly could use renovation, where not one dime of local tax dollars is being requested. We could provide a new recreation amenity, something that we don't have in this community, a new recreation amenity. This could give us another selling point for our tourism efforts and bring additional people into our community. And we can put Harmon Field back on the map. I know there's a lot of talk about Harmon. We've probably talked more about Harmon in 2 months than we have in about 10 years. But doing this project would put Harmon Field back on the map and turn what used to be a hub facility back into a hub by injecting life and bringing the people back to this facility. And we feel like what better way to honor, honestly, the Harmon name and the tradition and the memories of everything that happened at Harmon than to bring people back and to make this a hub facility again. And we believe this project would certainly do that. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity. I'd be happy to answer any questions that council members may have.
Questions, comments?
Thank you. I mean, I'll just say that, just maybe get things started, but, I mean, I know you did this last night and again this evening, but, you know, I think your last comment is what really sums everything up, is just the fact that it provides a new opportunity that we don't currently have in our county to our citizens, which things like that is what goes to improve our quality of life. And then the byproduct, the best part about it, from a byproduct standpoint, it's also an economic engine at the same time. And we're able to accomplish that without using our local tax dollars. So that's a lot of positives. So,
Yeah, I'd say you've done your homework and then some. I mean, this looks fantastic. This is, we've listened to the community. Community said this is what we need. We have an opportunity here with YMCA. It's a great partnership. We're revitalizing a park that really needs, could use a facelift and then some. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, where do we sign on the dotted line? Because this is great. This is fantastic. So, that's my.
Ms. Ackland?
Steve, I mean, I really appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you having the public hearing, the public meeting, and everyone coming. I just want to take us all back to 2008, when there were probably 300 people at the Wicomico Church wanting a park. The county bought 100 acres for them to have a park. We have paid for 2 engineer studies. Those citizens still don't have a park. It's 100 acres on Lemon to Shield Road. It's hard for me. It's just hard for me to swallow this when they are still waiting, even for a plan for a park. I mean, it's not like we don't have land that we could develop a pickleball court. We do. We already have it. And that's just, it's tough for me.
I'll just make one quick response to that. There are 2 different discussions. I mean, trying to link those 2 things together, I don't get that. I mean,
Well, the
that's
money
2
aspect, we
totally
have this
different
money, and so we're going to take this money, right? Or is this money only allocated for a public-private partnership?
No.
So we could use it for
certainly
something else.
the YMCA money, if you were to propose doing this somewhere else, the YMCA is not going to kick in $300,000. That's because we're adjacent. So I think if you considered anywhere else, I hear you on what you're saying with the West Metro Core. As you know, last month we got approval and funding for a master plan. So I will tell you, we're doing about 100 things at once. There's no
You have a
reason.
lot going, yeah.
Yeah, there is no reason why we can't do that and this. I don't see that as one or the other. I'll also point out maybe 2 other things. I mentioned the tourism value here of Harmon. The ability to go outside of Harmon within walking distance is huge. To have a facility within the city where it's accessible to the most amount of people, I think Harmon is ideal for that reason, for many reasons, in addition to the contribution and partnership from the YMCA. So I think the opportunity at Harmon is where you want to go. And I think at the West Metro, I think, quite honestly, and that'll be part of the public planning process to do that master plan, but I think you could do some pickleball courts out there as well. We put 2 out in Sharptown. Like I said, we put 2 in Kilburnie. I think the residents on the west side may enjoy that quite a bit. But for your hub facility, I think that needs to be central for the reasons that I've outlined. And I just think it's the right opportunity. And the grant that you referenced, it's an FY22 grant, and I look at the West Metro, I look at Conley Mill. I'd love to throw $700,000 at Conley Mill. We're nowhere close, and so that grant money wouldn't help us there. It has to be something for something that's ready, and this is ready.
Ms. Holloway?
Last night, a gentleman came to the meeting wanting to, and it was advertised, questions and comments, but you all wouldn't take any questions. So he emailed me 2 questions. And I'm going to read those to you. I'll read the first one. How many new staff, county staff members, is it going to be necessary to run the faculty in optimal fashion so that it succeeds and is able to function as a tourism hub?
As far as full-time staff, I think for this, I don't anticipate any. When you're talking about other parks, it may be a different story, but for this, we don't anticipate additional full-time staff. You'd need part-time staff to run programs.
So it's going to take staff that you already have, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's
So
correct.
it's not going to be any additional staff that's going to need to be hired or paid to run this?
anytime you're running programs, you're going to need to have part-time people, but correct, for full-time staff, that's
All
great.
right, okay. Well, you've already answered this, I guess. What is the preliminary estimated revenue for the pickleball facility?
I don't have a number as far as if you're talking about program revenue, because we have not, one of the things we have is flexibility in the agreement with the YMCA as to who is going to run the programs, and that's something that would need to be fleshed out. So depending on who's running the programs, that would change that estimate. So I don't have that number right now. I can tell you, I think what they experienced in Alabama, as far as the tournament stuff and the 2 trial tournaments that we did at Billie Jean Jackson on makeshift courts, getting people from all over the Mid-Atlantic, I think we could get similar results from the tourism end, certainly.
I would, Steve, thank you for the presentation, excellent presentation. And I applaud you because, I think you're always ahead of the curve. You always have been. You've done that. You've demonstrated that with the Henry Parker Complex. You've demonstrated that with Field 7.5. You're looking at another public-private partnership with the YMCA. And these things aren't always easy to put together, so you've been very successful with it. I do agree with, I recognize Councilman Ackley's concerns, but I don't think one, as Councilman McCain said, one does not preclude the other. You can work on a parallel course to have both done. I think it's instrumental. We have the $700,000 that we know that we're getting from the state. And again, that is something we do not want to just bypass, drag our feet for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, the states, because the states, they've done that before. They said, if you're not interested, it's gone. So I commend you again for this. I'm fully in favor of it. I like the alliance that you've created. I'm really excited about the idea of the tournaments and the funding, the money that will bring to this area. The one thing that, a lot of people always complain about in any community is, there's nothing to do here. But you constantly are growing that, consistently, so that, yes, there is something to do in Wicomico County, and there's a variety of things that you can do in Wicomico County, this being just a new addition. So I'm afraid Harmon Field, as you stated, I think you proved very well, because that was my concern, the viability of that park. I would only request, I'm so in favor of this, I would only request that maybe we could put a Harmon Field somewhere else, or put the name maybe at the Pony League or some other area where we could at least still respect the name of Harmon as it was originally intended.
Yeah, and thank you for your comments. So there's actually an easement on the deed, or language in the deed that requires that to remain Harmon Field.
Okay.
So if it were to relocate, we would need to work through that. But we don't have intentions of changing the name of the park. So it would still remain Harmon Park or Harmon Field. We just have different amenities there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Great.
There's one thing, I read the agreement several times, and you always hope for the best when you enter an agreement. YMCA is putting $300,000 in. There's an agreement that, we're going to have control of the park. Anybody can use the park without being a member of the Y. But what happens in a year or so if suddenly the YMCA or the county isn't happy with the arrangement? What happens to that $300,000? Does the county have to pay it back? There's nothing in the agreement that specifies what happens if one party or the other party fails to hold up its obligation and the other party isn't happy.
Yeah, so there's some termination language in the agreement that would talk about a separation, and the
I read that, but it didn't say anything about the monies.
yeah, give me 1 second. The Harmon funding, they've wanted that to be, and it is noted in the agreement, the funding is prioritized for the pickleball. I think that's their vested interest, where they see the most potential. So if something were to happen in between, there is a comment, and I'd have to reread it myself here, but where I believe it would be a prorated type situation where if something fell apart to that level, that we'd have to weigh out in a prorated way if there was a reimbursement. The way we've proposed it, and again, this gives the YMCA time to do some fundraising, because I presume that's where their funding is going to come from, is that we would forward fund this through our tourism, so they would reimburse us as that were. So certainly hope that would not happen, but I understand. Yeah, I understand.
Steve,
Yes.
I wasn't there last night. I had to chair another meeting at 7 o'clock. I would have loved to have been there. But you do know that the Delmarva Pony League, I think somebody mentioned them, had a meeting on Wednesday, and they sent a request, a letter of intent. They would love to have that field. They have 300 kids playing, and there's only one baseball field, and they've got a need for softball. That's 300 families. They're all local. And that field, Harmon Field, it's a nice field. It's got 2-story brick concession stand, press box, brick dugouts. The bleachers are there. Wouldn't cost anything. I'm not against pickleball at all. As a matter of fact, I want to see pickleball. I expected the presentation you just gave us, I expected to see that for the West Metro Core. That's what I expected to see. And I would like to see pickleball at Winter Place Park, at Naylor Mill Road, any of the schools. The schools have a lot of property. Why not put it there and invite the schools to be a part of it? But we've got 300 kids in one field there, and they have a need for girls softball, but what are we going to do for them?
We'd be happy to work with them. I will tell you, we've not heard directly from them that there was a need until
I sent you that letter.
Yesterday, right. And even since that time, I'll tell you, like for fall leagues, for example, most little leagues don't play in the fall. Fruitland does fall ball. Eastwick, I think, has a couple teams that play.
Fruitland's been playing fall ball for about 10 years.
Right. But the majority of the little leagues, so Delmar doesn't have a fall league, Eastwick, I think 1 or 2 teams. So we even talked to the East Wicomico president today after having received that. Their fields sit empty in the fall, so it'd be a great fundraiser for the little league if they went out and used those fields. We're about to put lights on field 7 and 8 at Parker, so we're going to have the ability to put people out at Parker, especially in the fall when it gets dark early. We'll have 8 fields with lights. We'll work with anybody, and if the Pony League has a need, we'd be happy to sit down with them and find opportunities for them. Again, I don't think there's a shortage of.
Well, they've already expressed they have a need, and Harmon Field is like a short walk right around the corner on the other side of the Elks Club. So, to me, that looks like a good option. I do want to see this come to fruition. I think it's a great idea, but I'd like to see it at all of our parks. But I would like you to really consider that Harmon Field, where the baseball field is, and consider those 300 kids that are playing fall ball at Delmarva Pony League. If they're playing with 300 kids in the fall, can you imagine how many kids are going to be playing in the spring during regular baseball season?
Again, we're happy to meet with them. We're happy to help them. And certainly we would want them to find a place to play. So we'll work with them. And
I know they're watching, and I'll be in touch with them.
Yeah.
But
very good.
any more questions or comments?
Just
Hastings.
Just last on that point, I think what makes this space so important is that it's right next to the YMCA. We have a partnership with the YMCA, $300,000 on the table, and just on that side alone. So I think that's what's most important about this space for pickleball. In addition to being next to, walking distance of the city park, you could go on and on why this is a great location. I think we can, Mr. Miller is actually one of the best at trying to help work with the community to help find needs. So I'm sure we could help Pony League find a better space. But for this space for here and now, I think this is a great proposal, and I'm fully in support.
Thank you. If I could, so I don't know what the next steps are, and I'll defer to Ms. Hurley or Mr. Dodd. One of the things that we're requesting tonight is, in order for that state grant to be approved, the Board of Public Works has asked for consensus from the council that we would, in fact, accept that grant. So that is one of the things I'd like to see if could be resolved, that we could go to the Board of Public Works and say, hey, this is something we'd like to see happen. So I don't know if that's a possibility tonight, but.
So you're looking for a letter of support?
Yes, sir.
We can do that in a work session, yes.
And given the time is of the essence, I think we should do that.
Without a public hearing?
Yeah, we don't need
Public hearing's next on the agenda.
We don't need a public hearing for a consensus.
Yeah.
Grant, giving a consensus on the grant would not require a public hearing, but if council desires to move forward with the actual agreement, that's a 10-year agreement, so that does require a public hearing. And I think I did write down that we can have that
Right.
on November the 2nd.
I've got that.
Council agrees to that.
If I can interject,
Yes, sir.
Steve, we need to let the state know something more concrete than a future work session, and is that right?
On the grant, yes, they, to
Our-
get on that
Our
agenda,
time
yes.
is extremely short on this for some reasons. And we need to act now as far as letting the state know that we're serious about this proposal. And the proposal is specifically for Harmon Field, for the project that he has proposed. That's what we're asking very kindly for you to consider, to give us some sort of guidance so that we can give the state that we're serious about this particular proposal. That's what we're asking for.
I'd be happy to vote on that now if that were able to do so, to get a letter, or at least start that process, right?
I'm in favor of it.
Mr. McCain?
I'm in favor of it.
Mr. Davis?
In favor.
Mr. Holloway?
Letter.
Ms. Ackley? For the letter, I have no problem sending a letter, but if something happens and we say no, that's going to affect us in future requests for funding. But
Yes,
I
it
have to consider my constituents, so I'm just going to say no. I mean, you have the votes, but I'm going to say no because of my constituents that play baseball at Delmarva Pony League.
Understood.
So
Will that letter, will the executive, will you be doing that letter, or are you, Ms. Hurley, who will be doing this letter?
I can write it.
Okay,
yeah, Ms. Hurley can write it and I can sign it.
very good. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Soto and Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Ms. Hurley?
Are we not going to decide on the agreement tonight as far as doing the public hearing? Because I would need to start that advertising process. if we were gonna have-
You said November 2nd, and I thought that was a good idea.
I just want to make sure there was consensus.
Is that a day meeting or a night meeting?
That would-
That's the night meeting. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm good with that.
Fine.
All right.
Yep. Get to work.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right. Next on the agenda, update on council goals. Does anybody have anything that they want to discuss? Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll see you again.
I'll just mention that I did do some research on the emergency medical service goal for Councilman Davis.
I saw that. Mr. Davis, do you want to speak on that, or Ms. Hurley, do you want to speak on it?
Well, I just wanted to mention that I did send that out to
Okay.
everyone. I did have one county respond after I sent it out, so I'll update that for everyone.
Yeah, okay. right.
And then perhaps Mr. Davis can update council on the next step.
All right, thank you. Mr. Davis, you have anything else on that?
No, I've been meeting with a couple of chiefs, and we're going to put together what it would cost the county to operate the county EMS
Sure.
and what it would cost as far as salaries and benefits and so forth, and what they would need to support it.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Davis. Anything down this end? Exactly.
So civic engagement,
Yeah.
the civic engagement goal, did you all want to put together a town hall type forum for the ISP providers?
Certainly.
Are you asking me, or?
I guess I was asking all the council members. I know we had talked about
Lynn.
different ISP providers
They're kind of loud out there.
coming in, and so I'm just,
We need to bring them in here. We don't need a town hall. We need to bring these guys in here so they can explain to us what they can do.
so,
You talking about for the broadband?
yeah.
Yeah, we need to get these guys in here because they're the ones that can go get the funding. The town hall is going to help us. We need to get the funding. First of all, we need to get that map done to show the areas that
All the
need it.
pockets that
We're
need it.
behind the eight ball. We're way behind. Did you hear the guy? He said we're the only county that hadn't. stepped up
I'm
to
just
the
sharing
plate.
my civic engagement goals.
And you know we've been asking about this for many months.
No, but you didn't need to talk to those guys. We need to get the guys that's going to do the
That's
work
right.
in here. Those guys weren't the ones going to do the work. They're the ones that are going to give you the money.
You know where the buck stopped.
So does anyone else want to do any town halls?
I have no problem
Any
doing a
other
town hall.
comment?
If you want to do your own, that's fine. If we have individuals to bring in here, like Mr. Davis says, I'll be glad to do that too.
Also up to any town hall you hold.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, you can still have the town halls, but you hear what the guy said.
Yeah, no, I mean,
The
I
money
just,
is running out, and if we don't get the people in here to go after the money, we're going to lose it.
do you have
Once it's gone.
ideas for any other town halls that you
Excuse
would?
me?
Do you have ideas for any other town halls? Since that's my goal of civic engagement.
It's that civic engagements, we get that.
Okay.
I mean, the town halls are fine, but you need to get the people in here that's going to do the job, and it's going to go get the funding.
Well, she doesn't need to. We do.
That's what I said, we do. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
have a town
as a
hall, but
body.
we need to get these guys in here.
Yeah.
Because you see the guy said the money's running out fast.
Yeah.
Right. Well, do you have any other town halls or topics that you would like to have a town hall about? And we've got water and sewer you can have a town hall on, you got
And
EMS.
I've had them. I didn't know if other council members wanted to have them, if they wanted me to help put them together, if, I'm just offering my assistance.
Joe wants to know which town.
Which town?
I plan on hosting a town hall, actually.
You do?
I haven't yet
Okay.
planned. I haven't
I
Thank
think,
you.
I
So
think
put that down
town
as
halls are a
progress
great
goal.
idea.
Good, but
All right, if you come up with anything, let us know.
Okay.
Anything else on the council goals? All right. Ms. Hurley, next on the agenda is the discussion of the Compensation Allowance Commission. Do you want to go over what we discussed this morning?
So, Charter Section 204 requires the county council to establish by law a compensation allowance commission that is to recommend to the county council the compensation allowances to be paid to members of the county council and the county executive. The county council established the compensation allowance commission by legislation, and that is actually codified in the county code as Chapter 18. That's actually titled Compensation Allowance Commission. Historically, the county executive, is my 3 minutes up already?
That's something else.
The county executive has historically submitted the nominees to council for confirmation. But last week, I notified the staff in the county executive's office that we had not received any names yet for confirmation. And then Monday evening, I received an email from the acting county executive, basically stating that it's not the county executive's office role in the establishment and deliberations of the commission, the resolution of the commission, or any bill passed by the county council relating to the commission's recommendation, and that the compensation allowance commission is the charge of the county council. I've spoken to our attorney, Mr. Mitchell, about this, and he seems to think that the council has the authority to go ahead and move forward with selecting individuals to serve on this commission. But the code and the charter are silent on how that process is to take place. So I'm seeking guidance from council on.
So while I'm thinking about that, does that require a charter amendment at some point?
No. it
If
does
I could,
not.
if I could just speak.
Mr. Mitchell?
The real problem is in Chapter 18, it simply says the commission shall be appointed. It doesn't say who appoints. Normally, you would think that would mean the council would appoint, but like, as Ms. Hurley said, historically, the
Everything that was down there.
county executive has nominated, and that's a normal way of doing it. He nominates and you approve. But erroneously, some of the resolutions appointing these people over the years have said that 413 provides that the county executive will nominate, but it doesn't. It's all of the language is basically that they will be appointed. It doesn't say who will do it, how they'll do it, or anything like that. So they don't really. The big key is that all the different things that tie the county executive into making the nomination all refer to things that are in the executive branch. And when you look at what this compensation commission does, it's very independent. It's much different than most boards and commissions, and that's because of its role. It should be independent from the people who it's going to recommend on their salaries. And I've looked at the what's called the Citizens Advisory Board, where the county executive does appoint, but basically that's a different. It kind of looks like this because this only meets periodically. But this is kind of a permanent deal. It meets periodically every time that period comes up.
Right.
Whereas the citizens' commissions are usually for a particular purpose. They run their course and they're over with. So I don't think it qualifies for that. I think it's up to the council to make its nominations and go from there.
And I'll just also say that this is very time sensitive because the commission is to submit a report to the county council within 15 days after the beginning of the fourth term of the council. And those dates would be, so December the 7th is the first Tuesday in December, so that's when the beginning of the fourth term would start. 15 days after that, you're looking at December the 22nd. Now, we do have a council meeting on December the 21st, so ideally, they would want to submit the report to council at that meeting.
So if we make,
lot of time.
if we make some appointments through the county council, we can do it at the October 19th meeting? That's not too late, is it?
So my suggestion would be to advertise starting tomorrow.
Right.
And I've drafted a public hearing notice, or not public hearing, but
Doesn't
a
need a
public
public,
notice
yeah.
for that. And then have the application period open through October the 15th, which is the Friday right before that Tuesday council meeting. We meet on October the 19th. I think it'd be a good idea to have a closed session before our meeting on the 19th. Perhaps we can come in at 9:30 in the morning instead of 10, have that closed session, and then during the legislative session, approve a resolution making the appointments so they can get to work right away. Otherwise, we have to wait another 2 weeks.
Is everybody in agreement to an early work session on that date? Okay. All right. How many members? I think I looked on the list and there was like 9.
It's 11 members,
11.
and you have to decide a chair.
The one letter that you had in there, I thought I counted 9.
According to.
Memo Derricker was on it.
11.
11, okay.
Could we also send letters to those individuals and let them know that this period has come up again if they were interested, in just in case they don't see it in the advertisement?
Yeah, 'cause it would be good to have some consistency on this committee. In fact, I served on this when I was in between council service. But I know also it's important for some guidance in terms of, and information in terms of like, when it comes to executive salary, for example. I remember, we had all the information from all the counties that had executives and their populations, and we had a chart and it had the, all the salaries of the executives, as you should do in any kind of compensation study. And we had the same thing for the counties for council members, as far as the ones that were similar in size to us. And we had what their duties were, because it differs in some counties compared to others, because you're a charter county or a non-charter county. But, we had that information, so it was very peer-oriented, once it should be, but they need that guidance. Especially if we have all new faces, where that's where it could be good having some repeat.
Mr. Cannon, which members are you talking about? The one from last session?
Yes.
The immediate ones?
Yes.
I guess it was the last letter I saw. Okay.
I did speak to Dr. Memo Derricker, just because I was concerned that they wouldn't have enough time, and where he was the chair of the last commission. I just kind of wanted to get a feel of how much work was involved and, how long it would take. He does think we can get it done by that deadline. And he did mention that he has the database to get that information.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any more questions on that?
We've talked about,
I spoke about that.
Mr. Hastings?
Oh, I'm sorry.
we talked about trying to maybe raise the salary, or that's been brought up multiple times for the sheriff's office. Is that a place for this committee to go over, also this commission?
We could ask them, but the sheriff's office can be done separately.
Or is that even appropriate? I'm just throwing that out there.
So the charter specifically says the county commission member or county council members and the county executive, but historically they have, as a courtesy to the council, done research for the sheriff.
Sure.
For
Because,
the Board of Education members also?
well,
I don't believe they've done that in the past.
keep in mind with what Mr. Taylor told us also, the sheriff has to be, any increase for the sheriff has to fall exactly in line with these increases for the executive and the county council. You can't give the sheriff a raise in the four-year interim It has to be at the exact same time. Part of a charter amendment, I believe, we're looking towards on this committee is to add the sheriff to that. I would hope so, because he falls.
And it was discussed with the sheriff once before about looking into an increase for the office. Mr. Mitchell, did you have a comment? Yeah, I remember
The
that.
state law requires that it
Did you
only
have a
be
comment?
done
I
in
think it's been covered.
the fourth year.
Yeah.
Oh, and no, there was something else. Ms. Hurley and I talked about this. There's really no penalty if you don't make the deadline.
There is no penalty. Yeah. It'd be nice to make
Yeah,
the deadline, though,
let's
be on
make the
time.
deadline.
I mean, you should obviously try to do that.
Yeah. Any more questions or comments? Mr. Hastings?
One last question was, I remember listening last time you had this committee talked and having it go over, I was sitting right there. I thought then that whatever recommendation should start not the 4-year process, but the following year. So if the recommendation that was made, because there's the obvious issue that if someone's running for council again or running for office, that you look like you're giving yourself a pay raise, which is why everyone always like, well, I don't want to ever look like that. So I think the only way that I can imagine to break that is to say, okay, we're voting 4 years ahead, because at least then it gives you some time or something to point to. So I don't know if that's something that we're able to do or something that could be done, but you know, whatever. But I think that could be then helpful, at least.
Well,
I think that could be helpful.
That's a charter amendment.
Well, again,
Oh, yeah.
I think it follows the same, and Mr. Mitchell, you could check on this if you'd like, but it falls in the same guidelines. State statute insists that it be that fourth quarter, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's state law.
Right, because we had discussed that before about doing it at the beginning of the term.
Right.
Having
Well-
the council do it at the beginning of the term, and that way it's 4 years down the road.
Is the state law only that it has to be done at that point in time? When does it, what about taking effect? I guess that's the question in my mind, is because can you have it take effect 4 years later?
Well, it says, I think it says the year before, the fourth year before the new term.
Yeah.
So you'd be putting that in effect the next year.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at now.
Either way, you're not giving yourself a
5
raise, because you got to get reelected if you want to.
Yeah, but that always happens. Look
But
at-
everybody
well,
feels like, everybody's going to think I'm giving myself a raise.
You can't count, Joe.
And I think it was 1992 or 1994 since the last increase for the council. Does
That's
anybody?
the reason why, because no one ever wants to look like they're giving themselves pay raise. So that we need to, in my opinion, we need to address that. If we can.
So,
Yes, maybe.
any more questions or comments?
Well, I would
Mr.
say
Kemp.
that would be maybe a charge for Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell?
Look into,
That'd be great.
Can you do that, Mr. Mitchell? Everybody's in agreement?
I don't agree with
You
it.
mean without changing the charter or the statute?
Yeah.
He's talking about voting like this December for 4 years later.
Yeah, so whatever comes in, it would take effect not for that council, but the following council.
No.
Jesus.
Anyway,
Why don't we just vote for the next?
It doesn't matter to me.
I think we're going to overrule you, Josh. I don't think we.
But it would be nice if the councils could do it after they start their term, and that way it's 4 years down the road. So, Ms. Hurley, is that all you got?
That's when we should vote.
Yes, so I'll advertise, stating that we'll accept applications until the 15th.
And keep in mind who we're going to appoint, you're going to send letters. Mr. Mitchell, is that all you got?
That's all I have, sir.
All right, need a motion.
So moved. Adjourn.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for sitting through the whole meeting. It's a lot of dynamics, isn't it?
Who's that now? To the airport.